There is a hidden danger unfolding right now when almost nobody sees coming because it's creeping in quietly, piece by piece. But by before March 2026, it will hit every household, and by then, it will be too late to fix. I'm telling you this because I've been tracking supply chains, price movements, and grain inventories for months. It's information the public never hears until the shelves are already empty. And what I've discovered is simple but terrifying. Only a handful of foods will still matter when the collapse accelerates. Most of what people are buying today? Gone. Useless. Dead weight. And here's the part almost no one is ready for. One item later in this list will shock you. Because it's the most overlooked survival food in America, and it's disappearing faster behind the scenes than anyone realizes. Stick with me, because once I show you what's coming, you'll understand exactly what to stock now, while you still can. Number 1, beans. If rice is the backbone that keeps you standing during a crisis, then beans are the muscle that give you the strength to push through it. And this is where most people fail without even realizing it. They think stacking carbs is enough, but in every economic collapse, every famine, every long-term disaster in history, the people who survived didn't just have calories, they had protein. Real protein. The kind that keeps your body from breaking down under stress. That's exactly why beans aren't optional. They aren't a good idea or a nice extra. They are mandatory. Non-negotiable. The second pillar of any real survival plan. Without beans beside your rice, you're running on half power. And half power in a crisis is the same as none. The biggest mistake rookies make is trusting expensive substitutes. Protein powders. Jerky, overpriced survival meat buckets with flashy labels and long promises. But when the grid goes down, when freezers die, when stores empty out, all those expensive protein sources turn into liabilities. Meanwhile, beans, humble, ignored, underestimated beans, become pure survival gold. Dry or canned, they give you what no other cheap food can. Long-term protein, slow-burning energy, and the ability to create full meals with just a handful of ingredients. And when you combine beans with rice, something incredible happens. You get complete protein, the same amino acid profile as meat, but with a fraction of the cost, the risk, or the storage headache. In other words, beans turn your rice from simple calories into full, balanced survival nutrition. And the power doesn't stop there. Beans fill you up. They don't give you the sugar crash of processed snacks or the empty spike of cheap carbs. One bowl of beans can keep you going for hours, which is exactly what you need when you're working. Rationing fuel, repairing gear, or guarding your home during periods of unrest. This is why civilizations from the Americas to the Middle East used rice and beans as a survival pairing long before prepping even existed. When empires collapsed, people survived on legumes. When wars wiped out supply chains, families endured on beans. When droughts killed crops, communities fell back on these tiny protein-packed seeds that practically refused to expire. But just like with rice, the difference between prepping and pretending comes down to storage. Dry beans can last 20 to 30 years if you store them the right way. Mylar bags, oxygen absorbers, and sealed buckets. Done correctly, you not just storing food, you restoring future meals for your children and even your grandchildren. But here's where many people panic for no reason. As beans age, they get harder to cook. That doesn't mean they're bad. It means they need more soaking time or more fuel. And in an economic collapse, time is a resource, but fuel is priceless. That's why you must diversify. Dry beans for long-term survival, canned beans for instant, fuel-free meals. In a blackout, when every match matters, popping open a can of beans you can eat cold might literally save your life. People love to mock beans as boring, but starving is boring too, and a lot more painful. When crisis hits, nobody will care about flavor variety. But ironically, beans can be incredibly diverse. Black beans, lentils, chickpeas, pintos, they each bring different textures, cooking times, and flavors. Add even basic seasonings, canned tomatoes or a spoon of peanut butter, and you have hearty meals that lift morale. And morale is everything in an economic collapse. Food fatigue triggers emotional exhaustion. And emotional exhaustion leads to bad decisions, reckless behavior, and giving up when survival requires fighting on. Beans stop that spiral. But the economic warning signs are already flashing. In the last year, beans, lentils, and chickpeas have spiked 15 to 20% in many regions due to droughts, fertilizer shortages, and shipping disruptions. And every crisis in history has the same pattern. Starchy foods go first. Protein-rich foods go second, and fats disappear last. When shelves empty again, and they will, beans will vanish faster than toilet paper in a pandemic. People who mocked beans will be the ones fighting for dented cans, begging for protein, paying triple in black markets, or trading away precious supplies just to get a few servings. You don't need to be one of them. With a small investment today, you can secure decades of protein, stable meals, a complete nutritional system when you combine beans with the rice from Chapter 1. That combination alone can help you outlast most people during a prolonged collapse. And if things get truly desperate, beans also become powerful barter currency, especially canned ones, because protein is always scarce in a long-term crisis. Stack beans now dry for the decades ahead and canned for the emergencies that will hit without warning. Your survival depends on having both. Number 2, oats. By the time you've secured rice and beans, you've built a powerful foundation. But survival isn't just about having food. It's about having the right kind of fuel at the right moments, especially when energy becomes your most precious resource. And this is where oats quietly become one of the most underestimated lifesavers in an economic collapse. People overlook them because they're simple, cheap, and humble. But that's exactly what makes them deadly effective. When you need something fast, light, filling, and stable, oats outperform almost every so-called survival food that prepping companies try to sell you. And in a world where time, fuel, and energy become scarce, oats aren't just useful, they're essential. What most people don't understand is that breakfast becomes one of the hardest meals to maintain during long-term crisis. When the grid fails, and you're rationing propane, firewood, or whatever fuel you can scavenge, the last thing you can afford is a meal that takes 40 minutes to cook. And this is where oats become pure survival engineering. A handful of oats, a splash of hot water, and you have a full meal in minutes. Not hours, not half a day's fuel, just minutes. That is the difference between keeping your strength and falling behind. When others are wasting time, boiling beans, or using precious propane to heat canned meals, you'll already be fed, warm, and working. Oats give you something that junk cereals, sugary breakfasts, and processed snacks can't: endurance. While cereal gives you a short sugar high followed by exhaustion, oats deliver slow, steady energy for hours. In a collapse, where every day demands work collecting water, repairing gear, securing your home, helping your family, or simply staying alert, oats become a weapon. They keep you mentally sharp and physically ready at times when weakness is dangerous. And unlike most foods that drain morale over time, oats adapt to whatever situation you're in. Sweet, savory, thick, thin, you can shape them to fit whatever you have available. The versatility is unbelievable. With just a tiny bit of creativity, oats can turn into half a dozen different meals. Mix them with powdered milk or honey if you have it. Add canned fruit, or even a spoon of peanut butter for a massive calorie upgrade. Cook them with broth for a savory porridge. Grind them into flour if you need to stretch your baking supplies. Add them to soups to thicken meals and boost calories. Oats don't just feed you, they extend your entire pantry. They help you survive without needing 30 different types of food. In an economic collapse, simplicity equals strength, and oats are the definition of simple power. Then there's the storage advantage. Rolled oats can sit on your shelf for 1 to 2 years without any special preparation. Put them in Mylar bags with oxygen absorbers, and you've got a 10-year survival food. Take steel-cut oats or whole oat groats and seal them properly. And now you're looking at 20 to 30 years of stable storage. It's longer than most canned goods and almost as long as rice. And because oats are lightweight, you can store massive amounts without needing a bunker-sized pantry. Even better, you can package them in small single-use portions to prevent oxygen exposure every time you open a bag. People don't realize how valuable this becomes when markets collapse. Grain prices around the world have already surged in the last year due to droughts and export restrictions. Oats are no exception. Some areas have seen prices jump 15% or more in that. before a true crisis even begins. When the supply chain tightens again, oats will be wiped from shelves almost instantly. You'll see families fighting over cereal boxes while you're at home, calm, stable, and eating something far healthier and far more reliable. Oats don't need refrigeration. They don't need complicated recipes, and they don't require fuel-heavy cooking. They just sit there in your storage waiting to save you. But the biggest advantage oats give you is psychological. When you wake up hungry in a collapsed economy, when the air is cold, when stress is high, the food you start your day with determines how you survive the next 12 hours. A warm bowl of oats gives you the sense of a normal morning, even when nothing around you is normal anymore. It preserves that tiny spark of routine and dignity that keeps people moving forward during long-term hardship. That emotional anchor can be the difference between staying strong and breaking down. In a world where chaos kills the unprepared, oats make you fast, steady, and efficient. They save time, fuel, effort, and money, everything that becomes scarce during a collapse. They fill the one gap that rice and beans can't. Instant. Reliable morning fuel that gets you moving before the world demands more from you than you think you have left. Stock oats in bulk, now rolled for everyday use. Groats for long-term storage, because in a collapse, endurance becomes survival, and oats are endurance in edible form. Number 3, rice. When an economic collapse hits, the first thing people lose isn't comfort, it's calories. And the most brutal truth you'll ever hear about survival is this: without a reliable, dirt-cheap, high-calorie foundation, everything else you stockpile becomes nothing more than expensive clutter. That's why rice isn't just food. It is the line between surviving and pretending. When shelves go empty, savings vanish, and the supply chain snaps like a fragile thread. The people who have rice won't panic. They won't argue in supermarket aisles. They won't hope the government steps in. They'll simply eat, conserve, and outlast. Because rice is more than a staple. It's a strategy, a survival engine built on math, history, and brutal efficiency. The reason rice dominates every crisis isn't a mystery. It is the greatest calorie-per-dollar powerhouse on the planet. A 50 lb bag for around $25 delivers tens of thousands of usable calories, enough to stretch weeks or months depending on rationing. When your dollar collapses in value, and history shows it always does during recessions, depressions, hyperinflation, or war, you aren't going to care about trendy foods or organic labels. You're going to care about calories that keep your mind sharp and your body moving. Rice gives you that. It's not snack calories. Not empty junk food calories. Actual survival fuel that turns a $25 purchase into a biochemical lifeline. While others burn through overpriced survival bars in days, the person who stacked rice will still be eating, thinking clearly, making decisions instead of collapsing from exhaustion. But it goes deeper. Morale becomes everything during a crisis. And this is where rice silently pulls you out of despair. A hot bowl of rice feels like order in the middle of chaos. It signals stability to your brain, anchoring you when everything else feels unstable. Compare that to tearing open a protein bar, or eating cold processed mush out of a sealed packet. There is no comfort, no warmth, no psychological grounding. Rice gives you a real meal, the feeling of I can make it through another day. That mental advantage alone has saved people in wars, famines, blackouts, and natural disasters. Of course, the rookies fail in one predictable way: storage. They buy a sack, toss it in a closet, and call it prepping. But rice stored incorrectly is a betrayal waiting to happen. Moisture, oxygen, pests, any one of these can wipe out your food security instantly. Serious preppers use Mylar bags, oxygen absorbers, and food-grade buckets. That simple setup turns a $25 sack into a 25 to 30-year investment. Yes, 3 decades. It's in a collapse that isn't food, it's generational security. Imagine buying something today that can still feed your family in 2055. The kind of long-term leverage people dream about but never act on. And here's the part most don't see coming. Rice is already under pressure. Droughts, export bans, fertilizer shortages, and geopolitical conflict have pushed global rice prices up double digits. In the last year alone, some markets have seen spikes above 14%. And every economic collapse in history shows the same pattern. Cheap staples vanish first. The moment panic buying starts, rice becomes gold. A bag that cost $25 can jump to $50 or $60 overnight. You won't buy it later. You'll be fighting desperate crowds for whatever crumbs remain on the shelf. Meanwhile, the quiet prepper who bought early will be home, cooking, stable, and untouched by the chaos. Rice also becomes a force multiplier when paired with even minimal add-ons. A scoop of beans transforms it into complete protein. A spoon of peanut butter turns it into a calorie bomb. A pinch of salt and oil increases energy density. And if you have canned vegetables or broth, the psychological shift is enormous. Suddenly you're not surviving. You're eating a real meal in the middle of crisis. This is exactly why entire civilizations from Asia to the Middle East to South America were built on rice. Empires marched on it. Generations survived famine because of it. If it carried entire nations through history's darkest centuries, it will carry you through whatever economic collapse is coming next. Right now, the choice is brutally simple: prepare or pretend. People who think rice is too boring are always the first to panic when shelves empty. But those who stock deep, store properly, and prepare early will glide through the first wave of collapse with calm confidence. Your job isn't to impress anyone with fancy survival gear. Your job is to stay alive, keep your family fed, and avoid becoming part of the desperate crowd. Buy rice today. Seal it right. This is the foundation of your survival, and without it, everything else falls apart. Number 4, flour. Once you've secured rice, beans, and oats, you've built the core of survival. But to move from merely enduring collapse to actually living through it with dignity, you need something more, something that transforms basic ingredients into real meals, real comfort, real morale. That is where flour and wheat step onto the stage. In every economic crisis, every famine, every war-torn region in history, the moment bread disappears, society cracks. The moment bread returns, people feel human again. Flour isn't just another survival item. It is civilization in powder form, the bridge between desperation and stability. Without it, you're feeding your body. With it, you're feeding your spirit. During an economic collapse, morale becomes a survival resource as critical as calories or water. You can eat rice and beans for months, but eventually, monotony grinds you down. People lose the will to keep fighting. They stop caring. They make mistakes. But when you have flour or wheat stored properly, everything changes. Suddenly you can make flatbreads, tortillas, biscuits, bannock, pancakes, seitan with no yeast, no butter, no fancy equipment. A simple mix of flour, water, and heat can produce something warm, filling, and emotionally grounding. That one hot piece of bread can restore strength when everything else feels hopeless. But here's where inexperienced preppers collapse. They buy flour in bulk, toss it on a shelf, and think they're ready. Flour stored incorrectly is one of the fastest foods to go bad. It absorbs moisture, it grows mold, it turns rancid, it attracts bugs. And all of that can happen in a single year, sometimes less. That's why the untrained prepper thinks flour is too hard to store, and they avoid it entirely. But the truth is simple. Flour isn't the problem. Proper storage is the problem. Serious survivors use mylar bags, oxygen absorbers, and food-grade buckets. With that setup, flour jumps to a 5-year lifespan or longer. 5 years of morale, 5 years of bread, 5 years of survival comfort. But the real power move, the path from prepping rookie to genuine long-term planner, is storing wheat berries instead of flour. Wheat berries are whole kernels, untouched, unprocessed, sealed by nature herself. Store them properly, and they last 30 years or more. Yes, 3 decades of reliable food, sitting quietly in your home, waiting for the day you need it most. When everyone else is hunting for stale loaves or overpriced substitutes, you'll be grinding your own fresh flour, cooking hot bread, and feeding your family like it's a normal day. That's not just survival, that's victory. And the economics are unbeatable. While everything else inflates, wheat remains one of the cheapest calorie staples on earth. A 10-pound bag of flour often costs just a few dollars. A bag of wheat berries gives you hundreds of servings for pennies each. In a world where survival buckets cost $200 to $400, but offer barely enough calories for a week, flour and wheat allow you to produce thousands of calories. For a fraction of the price and with actual flavor and morale included. No survival company will ever push wheat berries because they can slap a luxury price tag on them. But you don't need marketing, you need results. And wheat delivers results through every crisis in human history. In a true collapse, something even more powerful happens. Bread becomes community currency. When food shortages hit, people riot over bread. When wheat disappears, panic begins. But if you have wheat stored deep, you don't just have food, you have bargaining power. A few pounds of flour can trade for candles, medicine, batteries, even tools. And a hot loaf fresh from a pan or fire, that becomes priceless. Bread has always been the heart of barter economies. And the person who can provide bread during scarcity becomes someone people respect, protect, and depend on. But the clock is already ticking. Global wheat shortages, fertilizer crises, shipping restrictions, and weather extremes have driven wheat prices sharply upward. The next supply chain shock could double prices overnight. And when shelves finally empty, bread ingredients will vanish faster than canned goods. When that happens, people who laughed at wheat will be the first ones lined up outside bakeries that have nothing left to sell. Meanwhile, your storage silent, steady waiting will keep you fed whether the crisis lasts months or years. And don't underestimate the morale boost flour delivers. In the middle of collapse, when stress steals sleep and fear drains motivation, the act of mixing dough, shaping it, and cooking it gives you a sense of control. It reminds you that you are not powerless. It reminds your family that you can still create something warm with your hands. It turns survival from misery into endurance, and endurance into hope. If you want to survive collapse with strength, not just hunger and exhaustion, then flour or wheat berries must be part of your plan. You don't need a bakery, you don't need fancy tools, you don't need endless ingredients. You just need storage, heat, and willpower. And when the world breaks, the smell of hot bread might be the thing that keeps you fighting one more day. Don't skip flour. Don't delay wheat berries.
Storing them now.
Because in every collapse, bread is the first comfort to vanish and the last comfort that keeps people alive. Number 5, fats by the time you've secured rice, beans, oats, and flour. You've built a survival system that can carry you through almost anything. But there is one final piece, one last pillar that most people completely overlook. And it's the flaw that destroys their entire prepping plan. You can survive without variety, can survive without luxury, but you cannot survive long-term without fat. In every famine, every collapse, every extreme survival situation ever recorded, the people who broke down fastest weren't the ones who lacked carbs or protein, they were the ones who lacked fat. And in a collapsing economy where food prices spike overnight and shelves empty unpredictably, fat becomes literal survival currency. That's why peanut butter or another dense shelf-stable fat source becomes the wild card that separates those who merely scrape by from those who hold their ground. Here's the brutal reality nobody wants to face. Your body burns through carbs and protein fast, especially under stress. But fat is your long-term fuel. It keeps your brain sharp, your hormones stable, and your organs functioning. It regulates temperature and prevents the starvation syndrome known as rabbit starvation, the condition that devastates people who try to survive on lean foods without any fat. Explorers, soldiers, and disaster survivors documented it. For centuries, when fat disappears, the body collapses, even if you're eating plenty of other foods. That's why your survival stockpile is incomplete until you've secured a fat supply that lasts, travels well, and delivers massive calories in tiny servings. And nothing does that better, pound for pound, than peanut butter. Peanut butter is the perfect storm of survival efficiency. A single spoon delivers nearly 200 calories of pure, usable energy. A full jar holds close to 3,000 calories, enough to carry you through an entire day of hard labor without cooking, heating, or wasting fuel. In a collapse where every match, every battery, every ounce of propane matters, the ability to eat straight from a jar without preparation becomes priceless. When you're exhausted, freezing, rationing water, or under threat, you don't always have the time or resources to cook rice or soak beans. Peanut butter gives you instant strength. No fire, no tools, no waiting, and the versatility is unmatched. Stir it into oats for a high-calorie breakfast. Mix it into beans to add richness and fat. Spread it on flatbread or tortillas made from your flour stash. Add it to broth to create a savory, calorie-dense soup. Or eat it straight when your energy crashes and there's no time to prepare anything else. These little boosts of fat and protein can mean the difference between continuing your work or collapsing from exhaustion. In a world where labor becomes daily survival, hauling water, defending property, chopping wood, those calories matter more than comfort foods ever will. Then there's shelf life. Oils go rancid quickly. Butter spoils in days without refrigeration. Nut butters separate or degrade unless processed properly. But processed peanut butter, the commercial kind, with stabilized oils, can last 1 to 2 years unopened, and often longer when stored cool and dark. That stability alone makes it a top-tier survival fat. And unlike olive oil or coconut oil, peanut butter is both a fat source and a meal. One jar can feed you all day. Try surviving on olive oil alone, you can't. But peanut butter gives you both satiety and stability. And here, it's the part that makes peanut butter a weapon in a long-term collapse. Barter value. Everyone will have some carbs. Many will have canned goods. But almost no one will have long-term fat. Families will be starving for calories that keep them warm and functional. Parents will be desperate to feed children something comforting. Peanut butter becomes a luxury item in a dying economy, a compact, universally loved, calorie-dense, morale-boosting commodity. One jar can trade for medicine, candles, batteries, tools, eggs, or even security support. You're not just storing food, you're storing leverage. But even peanut butter isn't immune to global stress. Peanut crops have already been hit by droughts, fertilizer shortages, and high production costs. Prices have climbed nearly 10% in some areas. The next supply shock, whether it's war, weather, or shipping failure, could double prices or wipe shelves clean overnight. When that happens, people won't fight over chips or soda. They'll fight over calorie-dense staples that can keep their family alive another week. Peanut butter will vanish faster than rice, faster than beans, and far faster than flour. And the ones who fail to stock up will be the ones paying triple on the black market or trading. Weigh their last candles just to get a jar. This final piece of your stockpile isn't optional. It's the difference between surviving strong and starving weak. Your body needs fat. Your brain needs fat. Your morale needs fat. Your prepping plan needs a fat source that lasts, travels, and multiplies your meals. Peanut butter isn't a luxury. It's a survival tool, a calorie bomb, and one of the greatest morale boosters you can possibly store. Stock fats now, peanut butter first, oils second, because in every collapse, carbs fill your stomach, but fat keeps your body alive. Number 6. Peanut butter. As inflation eats away at grocery budgets and families struggle to afford protein, peanut butter becomes one of the most reliable emergency foods you can stock. One jar carries hundreds of calories, dense fats, protein, fiber, and real comfort, something you'll desperately need when stress levels rise and food options shrink. Peanut butter doesn't require cooking, heating, or preparation. In a blackout or blackout fuel crisis, a single spoonful becomes a quick, life-saving dose of energy. And when paired with oats, crackers, or rice cakes, it turns into an actual meal. But the real prepping MVP is powdered peanut butter. Lightweight, non-greasy, and capable of lasting 10 years in Mylar or sealed cans, it becomes your long-term backup when regular jars expire. Mix it with water or add it into oatmeal or shakes for instant protein. Supply warnings are already here. Droughts in major peanut-producing regions are causing processors to raise prices 8 to 10%. In a deeper economic collapse, calorie-dense foods like this will be the first to vanish or get hoarded. Protect yourself now. Buy several jars for current use and a large bag of powdered peanut butter for your long-term storage. Your future self will thank you. When an economic collapse hits, hope won't feed you and panic won't save you. Only preparation will. You now know the 5 foods that can carry you through the darkest days: ahead: rice, beans, oats, flour, and fats. Start small. Start today. But start. Every bag you store is one less crisis you'll face unprepared. Take control now, protect your family, and build the security no one else will hand you. Your survival begins today.